The secret began with a sentence my daughter whispered at my kitchen table. "Mom, whatever happens, please don't tell the children why I left." I stared at her. Outside, rain tapped against the windows of my small house. Inside, my daughter Laura sat across from me with both hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. She looked exhausted. Not physically tired. Something deeper. Like she had been carrying a heavy truth for so long that even breathing had become difficult. "What are you asking me to hide?" I asked. Laura looked toward the hallway. Her two children, Ethan and Lily, were upstairs. Ethan was 12. Lily was 9. They had been living with me for almost 3 months. "Just tell them that I needed time," Laura whispered. "Tell them Grandma is taking care of them until I'm ready." "Ready for what?" Laura's eyes filled with tears. "To come back." I wanted to ask more. I wanted to demand an explanation. But then she reached across the table and held my hand. "Mom, please." That one word stopped me. I had always been the person Laura came to when the world became too difficult. So I nodded. "Okay." I didn't know that one small promise would change our family forever. The next morning, Laura was gone. No dramatic goodbye. No long explanation. Just a note on the kitchen counter. "Take care of them for me." I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in a drawer. When Ethan came downstairs, he asked where his mother was. "She needed some time," I said. "When is she coming back?" I looked into his hopeful eyes. "Soon." It was the first lie. And it wouldn't be the last. The first few weeks were difficult. Ethan stopped asking questions after a while. Lily didn't. Every evening, she asked the same thing. "Grandma, did Mom call?" Sometimes she had. Sometimes she hadn't. Whenever Laura called, she asked about school, meals, homework, and whether the children were sleeping properly. But she never asked to speak to them. That bothered me. One night, Lily stood beside me while I washed dishes. "Does Mom still love us?" My hand stopped beneath the water. "Of course she does." "Then why doesn't she come home?" I didn't have an answer. So I gave her the answer Laura had asked me to give. Sometimes grown-ups need time to fix things. Lily nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Months passed, then a year. Laura sent money occasionally. She called less frequently. And slowly, the children stopped waiting by the phone. Ethan became quieter. Lily stopped asking when her mother would return. That frightened me more than her questions ever had. One afternoon, while cleaning the spare bedroom, I found an old box hidden beneath Laura's belongings. Inside were photographs, school certificates, a few birthday cards, and an envelope. On the front, in Laura's handwriting, were 4 words. "For Ethan and Lily." My heart began beating faster. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew that. But I also knew I had promised to protect the children. So I opened it. Inside was a letter. Laura had written it shortly before she left. The first few lines were enough to make my hands shake. She wasn't writing about needing a vacation. She wasn't writing about being tired. She was writing about something that had happened inside our family. Something she had never told me. Something she had specifically asked me to hide. I kept reading. Then I stopped. I couldn't continue. I put the letter back into the envelope and locked it in my desk. That night, I couldn't sleep. For the first time, I wondered whether keeping Laura's secret was actually protecting her children, or protecting Laura from the consequences of her own choices. Years passed. Ethan became a teenager. Lily grew into a thoughtful young woman. They knew their mother loved them. At least that was what I kept telling them. But they also knew she was absent. And children eventually noticed the difference between someone's love and someone's presence. One evening, Ethan found me sitting in the living room. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Why did Mom really leave?" My heart sank. Because things were difficult. That isn't an answer. I looked at him. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was old enough to recognize when someone was avoiding the truth. "Did she do something?" I remained silent. Ethan's expression changed. And I knew he had understood something from my silence. "You know, don't you?" I couldn't speak. "Grandma, what did Mom do?" I finally said, "Your mother asked me not to tell you." He stood there for a few seconds. Then he asked the question I had feared for years. Does she have the right to keep us from knowing? I didn't know. And that was the hardest part. That night, I called Laura. She answered after several rings. Mom, we need to talk. There was silence. I found the letter. Another silence. Then Laura whispered, I was afraid you'd find it. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Because I knew you'd look at me differently. Laura, your children are growing up without you. I know. Then why are you still hiding? She started crying. I thought if they knew what happened, they'd hate me. I closed my eyes. What happened wasn't the only thing you were afraid of, was it? Laura didn't answer. And that silence told me enough. The next day, I asked her to come home. She refused. So I drove to her. We met at a quiet cafe outside town. Laura looked older than I remembered. She kept staring at her hands. Finally, she told me everything. Not every detail. Some things were too painful to repeat. But enough. She had made a terrible decision years earlier. She had trusted the wrong person. She had hidden the consequences. Then, when everything became too difficult, she had convinced herself that leaving was the only way to protect her children. But the truth was more complicated. She had been afraid that if the children knew what happened, they would see her as a failure. So you left them instead? I asked quietly. Laura looked down. Yes. I felt tears fill my eyes. You asked me to carry this secret for years. I know. You didn't just ask me to keep a secret, Laura. You asked me to decide what your children deserve to know. I was scared. I know. That was the painful part. I knew she had been scared. But fear didn't erase the years. That evening, I went home and found Ethan and Lily sitting together at the kitchen table. They were waiting. Ethan looked at me. Did you talk to Mom? Yes. Did she tell you the truth? I sat down. For a long moment, I didn't know what to say. Then I remembered something Laura had forgotten. These were not little children anymore. They had the right to understand their own history, but they also had the right to hear it without being turned against their mother. So I told them the truth carefully. I didn't describe every painful detail. I didn't insult Laura. I didn't ask them to forgive her. I simply told them that their mother had made choices she regretted, that she had been afraid, and that her fear had caused years of distance between them. Lily began crying. Did Mom stop loving us?
No.
Then why didn't she come back? I took her hand. Sometimes loving someone and knowing how to face what you've done are two very different things. Ethan stared at the table. After a long silence, he said, She should have trusted us with the truth. I nodded. Yes. Laura came home several weeks later. She didn't expect forgiveness. She didn't demand to be welcomed like nothing had happened. She simply stood at the front door. Lily was the first to approach her. She stopped a few feet away. Mom, Laura's face broke. Yes. Lily looked at her for a long time. Then she asked, Why didn't you tell us? Laura cried. I was ashamed. Lily wiped her own tears. I wish you had trusted us. That sentence hurt Laura more than anger would have. Ethan stayed farther away. He wasn't ready. And for once, nobody pressured him. Laura understood that coming home didn't mean everything was repaired. It meant the truth had finally been allowed into the room. That night, after Laura had gone to sleep in the guest room, I opened my desk drawer. The old letter was still there. I read it once more. Then I folded it carefully. I didn't destroy it. I didn't hide it again. I placed it in an envelope and wrote, Their story belongs to them. Years earlier, I had believed keeping a secret was the same thing as protecting someone. I finally understood the difference. A secret can protect a person from embarrassment, but sometimes the truth protects a family from living inside a lie. Laura still had a long road ahead. Ethan needed time. Lily needed answers. And I needed to accept that I couldn't repair everything for them. But that was okay. Because families don't heal by pretending nothing happened. They heal when people finally become brave enough to say, I was wrong. I was afraid. I should have told you. And sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do isn't to keep a secret. It's to give the people they love the truth. And let them decide what to do with it.